Think about a baby. It's a beautiful little baby. Think about your grandchild or your own child when they were infants, and all the things about this child. A child that didn't choose where they were born, didn't choose who was the parent, didn't even choose the country that they were born into. And then you look at this baby, even ugly ones, and they're just stunningly beautiful. And they're beautiful because it's just pure life. There's no games being played. There's no deception, neither self nor towards others. There's just this beautiful organism, this beautiful little thing that came out of us. And we naturally cradle and we naturally start rocking, right, when we get a baby. And that soothes both the baby and us. And it's a coping mechanism, helping us deal with stress. It's a beautiful baby. And to me, every baby, no matter where they're born, even if they're born in Syria to an ISIS fighter family, the baby is beautiful. The baby is innocent. The baby is this wonderful act of creation where we partner with God and bring this beautiful life into being. There was a baby born in 1952 in what today is called St. Petersburg that was called Leningrad. And for you history buffs, you'll know that Leningrad was one of the most brutal battles in the history of warfare. The Nazis surrounded Leningrad towards the end of the war and laid siege to it, stopped all transport of food and supplies, and at the same time that they were killing people, they were starving them. In those 3 years, pretty much the whole city died. 3 million people died. 1 million, it is said, to starvation. And in the rubble of this terrible act of warfare, this beautiful little boy was born, 1952. And I imagine seeing this vulnerable baby in the backdrop of war, and I would have thought what I have felt when I meet babies, anywhere, anytime. This is, look at this beautiful life. And here's the hope, out of the rubble of war, here is the hope for the world. These are feelings that I have had in war zones. And a baby just changes everything. It brings you back to the first, most beautiful parts of us. Our true self is back there somewhere. And so this baby's born, but the baby is born not only into war, but terrible poverty. And this baby's father was brutally injured during the war, and the mother almost starved to death. And after this young baby was born, after this infant was born, Mom and Dad couldn't really pay much attention to the baby. They were busy trying to survive. 2 of this woman's older children died during this time. This baby's 2 brothers. And so Mom just wasn't there for the baby. Neither was Dad, and apparently neither was anyone else. And the baby grew up in a small apartment with 4 other families. They didn't have a way to bathe. There was no hot water or heat source in this apartment. And it was a rat-infested building. And so in his memoirs, this baby that was born and became a child, his playtime was chasing rats with his little friends. And he writes about one experience where he chased a rat into a corner in the apartment, and the rat turned on him and chased him. And he was terrified, and so he ran to the door, and he slammed the door shut and squished the rat. He killed the rat. And in his memoirs, he writes that the lesson I learned is don't ever get cornered. Don't ever let that happen. These are the early thoughts of this boy. And this baby became a boy and went to school. And at school, he was bullied. He had unusually small hands. He's still known for that today. And he was a small kid, and so he was bullied. He tried to learn boxing, but he was bad at it, and it had to do with his size and his hands, so he learned Taekwondo. And he got really good at Taekwondo, and he ended up in a gang in what is today St. Petersburg, Leningrad, and was this vicious street fighter. And one of the lessons he brought from his days as a gang member, that he also writes about today, is if you're going to get in a fight, always throw the first punch. Never wait for the fight to happen. If a fight's coming, if you think it might happen, break the person's nose right now. Don't wait. Always throw the first punch. And any street fighter knows that, but this is something that has been a life lesson for this young man. And so this neglect, this abuse, this bullying, that defined his childhood. And the most powerful gang in town, he realized, and this comes from people who study him, they say this, he went to the KGB headquarters to ask for a job, not because he was idealistic. He went to them because they were the toughest gang in town. And he wanted to be on the top and to be the toughest. And so he talked to the KGB, and the KGB laughed him off and said, "Go away, you're just a kid." And he said, "No, really, I want to know, what do I have to do to become a KGB officer?" And they said, "Well, go to school and get good grades and we'll talk about it." And so he went to school in Leningrad and got a degree in law and got a minor posting in the KGB, and through a series of events rose and ranked quickly to the point where today what we're talking about is Vladimir Putin. And the whole point of this story is the point of every battlefield. And the whole point of the story is the point of every impoverished part of town, or anywhere where children are not given the love that they need, the love that they anticipate at these critical times. If they don't get it, the window's closed, and the body stores that up. And these kids go on, depending on their circumstances, being more and more reactive to high stress. And the longer they're exposed to traumatic events or high stress, the more likely it is that they will be permanently damaged by it. Their body will remember that when that color is in the room, cortisol and adrenaline flood me and I got to fight for my life. They may not even be conscious of it. Their body will remember that tone of voice, and without even understanding what's going on, it's just, whoa, rage. Throw the first fist, throw the first punch, don't get cornered. Young Vladimir Putin. And so, what is it that could change things for Vladimir Putin? What could have changed things for him? What could it have meant to the world if someone were there giving him a healthy way to cope with what he was going through? What if we were there in those critical moments, seeing his mother failing to nurture this young life, and somehow we could give her a hand so that he could imprint with love and not just the terror of survival and neglect? What could have become of Vladimir Putin? And I think science tells us that he could have become a wonderful man. And so I was really blown away by your devotion. You asked a question. Could something evil that results in good fruit ever be good? Whoa. That's a heavy question. Food for thought, right? And think about Vladimir Putin. We think of him as the world fiend right now. I mean, what he has done to the world has upset the entire planet. His behavior is terrible. But where did this behavior start? How did it originate? It was just a lack of love. That's how it all started. A lack of care. And to some degree or another, every one of us in this room has experienced that. Because even the perfect parents don't get it right all the time, right? So we all carry some kind of wound with us. And to the degree that we're wounded, to that degree we may be damaged, even without conscious awareness or cognitive control of it. So what I'm describing for you is every child in an active battlefield. These kids are subject to daily air raid sirens. It's a terrible shrieking siren. They got to run into a cellar or a basement or a bomb shelter. The average child spends something like 37 days out of the last 12 months underground, just because of the air raid sirens and the missiles, artillery, and attacks of the Russian army. And living in this constant state of fear, how do they recover out of this chemical flood that's flooding their bodies? That's, their brain is saying everything's dangerous here. All adults are dangerous. Everything is scary. Maybe the parents don't understand what's going on, and when the child does something that they don't appreciate, they spank the child, right? Child really does, sincerely, they're not misbehaving. They're out of control. Literally, they don't have control because of this traumatic experience they're having, right? And so how do we help those kids? And what could we do to contribute to their well-being so that the war doesn't take more childhoods and create more Vladimir Putins? This is why my wife and I started this organization, Novi. But even more importantly than a legal name and a platform, because that's all an organization is this thing, this sense in us, this idea that love changes things. In 1 John chapter 4, which I read about 5 times this morning because it blew me away, it says God is love twice, full stop, sentence. God is love. And in probably 100 different ways, it talks about if you know God, you know love. If you love your neighbor, you're filled with love. There's a whole bunch of statements like yours. Love overcomes evil. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Good is the actions of love, right? And so how do we make this love that we have, to some degree or another, experienced from Jesus, how do we make that available to children on the battlefield? And that's what my wife and I, that's the problem we're trying to solve. And so I'd like for my wife to come up now and talk to you a little bit about that. Her name is Odni. It's a Viking name that means the tip of a spear that's been thrown. Solid Norwegian.